So it appears we are now being recorded. So with that in mind, I would like to call the 13th meeting of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. If you'd like to ask a question or give comment today, please use the raise your hand function. As always, we ask that you turn on your camera so that your name appears when you speak. Please feel free to cover the camera on your device if you do not want to appear on the screen. Also, if you have not returned your conflict of interest form, you are not permitted to participate in any motions or votes today. And to be respectful of everyone's time, there is a hard stop at 5 p.m. With that, can we move into roll call? And I'll ask Julia to please call the roll.
Thank you, Councilman. Is the representative from District 6 present?
Oh, here, that's me.
Is the representative from the Hill CDC present? Is the representative from the Hill District Federal Credit Union present? Mr. Witherspoon let me know he wasn't available to attend today. But just for the record, I've said it. Is the representative for the Hill District Census Group present?
Present.
Thank you, Arby. Is the representative from Wesley Center AME Zion Church present? Is the representative from Shenley Heights Community Development Program present? Is the representative from the Historic Hill Institute present?
Sorry, present.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Is the representative from Ujamaa Collective present? Is the representative from the Office of State Representative Ariane Abney present? Is the representative of the Office of the County Executive Fitzgerald present?
Present.
Thank you, Dan. Is the representative of the Office of the Mayor present? I see you mouthing present. Thank you, Lisa. Is the representative of the school, Pittsburgh Public School District present?
Present.
Thank you, Sala. And is the representative of Allegheny County Council present? All right, that concludes roll call.
Thank you. I believe we only have 2 of the 7 voting members present so far. Therefore, we cannot take any motions or take any votes, but we can certainly move through the meeting. And if that changes, I will be sure to update members once others may log on. That takes us to old business. I'd like to begin with the RFP update. Just so members are aware, the URA board did vote to be able to issue the RFP. And just as a reminder, this was the RFP to bring on consultants to help staff this initiative. The board did vote to move to have the URA authorize it. However, due to some ongoing conversations that potentially may help us begin to get dollars out more immediately, the RFP has not yet been released. And that will take me to the next update that I would like to provide members with. So as members may be aware, I, as an elected official, have received a lot of calls from concerned constituents in the Hill District about when these dollars will be released. I believe members of this committee have also received the same calls and questions and concerns about how quickly we'll be able to get dollars on the street. Even more specifically, I've received calls about people who are living in homes that need repairs, need assistance, and was there any way to begin getting those dollars on the street? And I believe the mayor's office has received the same calls of concern. And so after having conversations with the administration to gain their support, I did then reach out to the URA to have a conversation about our housing division and the work that we do there. And was there any way for them to be able to staff the effort that we would utilize them to begin immediately trying to expend the dollars that we've set aside for home repairs and things of that nature. After some conversations, they have agreed. Just so you're aware, and I believe our co-chair, Ms. Malians, just logged on. The co-chairs did meet with URA staff to discuss a temporary measure to help spend the LRTA dollars for housing repairs as soon as possible. The URA is now committed to providing an interim solution model that will model an existing program the URA already manages through our Housing Opportunity Fund. And with that, I would like to acknowledge Damara Carter, who I believe is with us, and she is the Chief Financial Officer of the URA. And I'd like to offer her the ability to say a few words before I will ask James Reed to give a brief presentation so that we can then have discussion.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Damara Carter, the Chief Financial Officer for the URA. As a member of the executive leadership team, I want you to know that we've heard your concerns and we heard the residents' concern around grappling with getting the Hill District LRTA funds out the door. But let me first say, I will not be able to stay on long for the meeting because I have a medical appointment, so I will have to leave shortly. But I wanted you to know that we put an internal group together that has been meeting since your last advisory board to discuss how we can provide greater support and to see if any of our programs can be modeled for you to get this money out. I want you to know that we are here to offer a deeper capacity to deploy the housing fund for the 2023 allocation. So we've asked James to provide you with a deep dive of the what and how. James will begin a short presentation that outlines the model approach to deploying housing funds for 2023. James, I'll turn it over to you.
James, before you go, there's someone who is logged on and it just says iPhone. Whomever iPhone is, could you please identify yourself for the record?
Reverend Grayson.
Thank you, Reverend. I'll turn it over to you, James.
Hey, thank you, Councilman, and thank you, Damara, for the introduction. I see Ms. Wolf is logging on, so I'm just gonna pause for a brief second until her audio is connected. So sorry.
Just for the record, having Reverend Grayson joined us and Lakeisha joining us, that does give us a majority of voting members present. So if there's any actions that can be taken today, and just for their benefit, we've asked the URA to talk about a program that we already have at the URA that deploys housing assistance dollars. And I've had a conversation with them about could they take a similar approach to helping us get our dollars out the door, which is what the community has been asking us to be able to do. Sorry, James, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman. Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to spend the next couple of slides talking through a program that we believe can serve as a model to get some of these reinvestment dollars out to be able to support the neighborhood and residents for housing repairs. And that program that we're talking about modeling is called the Home Owner Assistance Program, or HAP. And so, you know, there are two, I'm going to go into some of the slides that are going to contain some of the details of HAP. I don't want you to get too focused on the nitty gritty nuts and bolts. What I want you to focus on is we want to use this as a model because, one, it demonstrates that the URA has an existing infrastructure to be able to get housing dollars, to get dollars for housing repairs out into the street. And we have a process that has been utilized for multiple years that falls with a lot of the eligibility and spending concerns that this group has voiced in previous advisory board committee meetings. And so the last reason why we want to show this is because the HAP program is open right now. It's accepting applications through August 4th. So if you know of any of your constituents that are in need for those repairs, you can encourage them to, you know, visit the URA website and get connected to apply for the HAP program. So with all of that being said, I'm just going to give a brief overview of some of the key functions and features of HAP. So as you can see, the program is up to $35,000 in financial assistance for homeowners at or below 80% of AMI. Now, obviously from our discussions that maximum amount would be different, because in previous actions, we have limited the amount per of home repairs per recipient to 20,000. But in general, you know, those program funds can be used to bring homes into compliance with city code, undertake energy efficiency, and complete general property improvements. And can we go to the next slide, please? So here is, I know we've talked a lot about eligibility for LRTA dollars, and here is the current AMI chart for household size, and this is again at the 80% AMI level. So I'm just going to pause so folks can take a look at those numbers. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? And again, this talks about some of the details that are needed to ensure that the applications are, you know, complete and thorough, and that someone can go through, you know, the eligibility review and kind of get through it with the smallest amount of hiccups as possible. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so now that we've kind of covered the main features of HAP, here's more of the specifics that we're looking to use as a model for the LRTA dollars. So it would be for home repairs up to $20,000. This would be grant funding, as we've talked about before. We would look to have an application round, and we'd look to have that application round open for a month. That way, you know, we can get, that'll ensure people have the time to get their materials together for the application, submit it, get it approved. If there are any questions or concerns, we need to go back to a particular applicant, we can do that. And then from there, you know, we would be able to connect them with contractors to be able to start undertaking some of those repairs. Now, in terms of eligibility, we put together these suggestions based on some of HAP's criteria, but also from some of the conversations that we've had in past advisory board committee meetings. So, you know, our suggestions would be that on the eligibility side, there would be a lens applied that would be income based, as well as a demonstration of greatest needs. So that way, for example, if, you know, James Reed is coming in to apply and I'm going to do some improvements on my house, and you know, I'm at the 80% AMI level, but there's Miss Betty, for example, who's on, you know, assisted living, or, you know, her home has more significant infrastructure needs than mine does. Miss Betty's application would take priority over mine. It would be critical, you know, again, we would be prioritizing critical home repairs, households with school-age children, households with seniors, and households with disabled individuals. And then can we go to the next slide? Now, because the URA already has existing programmatic infrastructure, we would look to run this parallel, we'd look to run the LRTA dollars in a parallel fashion to HAP. And so URA staff would be able to receive the applications, complete the eligibility review, and then, you know, we would get, and then our staff would provide a recommendation to this advisory board for consideration. And we would like to, you know, I think there are a couple of ways that we could structure it, but I think it would be, there's a lot of merit to structuring this as a review of the slate of projects that we want to invest in, as opposed to a specific project by project. And we can get into that in the discussion portion. If the advisory board would then consent to that slate, we would then be able to move them forward through the process and connect them with contractors and arrange for the work to be done. And again, on the infrastructure side, I know something we have heard this committee be very concerned about is ability to have someone come out and make sure the work is being done appropriately and that it's done to high quality standards. And that function is already built into the infrastructure for the HAP program. So we would be looking to use that as well. And then the URA board would need to approve this temporary measure. So we would be looking to get authorization from the URA board as soon as our August board meeting. Next slide, please. And for just to kind of remind folks, this was the anticipated application process flow chart. And so what you're seeing in the purple highlight, these are the sort of things that the URA staff would be using, functions that URA staff would be doing for this temporary measure. And again, this is just for the temporary measure to get the housing dollars to get dollars for housing repairs out the door. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we need to revisit our allocation plan to talk about where the dollars for this temporary measure are going to come from. Now, we went back and revisited our previous meetings, and the last discussion we really had about the housing dollars in any particular fashion was in January of this year. However, we did not come up with a specific amount that we wanted to see spent in 2023 for housing repairs. We did discuss that housing repairs would fall under development initiatives. And you can see that for this year, we currently have $465,000 allocated to the development initiatives category. So we would ask this advisory board to discuss and advise what would be an appropriate amount to set aside of that subcategory for these housing repair dollars. And then I believe the next slide is just the last part of the allocation plan. So we can go ahead and move past that. Okay, so Gordon, if you want to back up one slide, 2 slides, actually. Yeah, perfect. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Councilman.
Thank you. Questions, thoughts from members? Let the record reflect. We've also been joined by Richard Witherspoon.
This is Reverend Grayson. Just excited that URA and others are thinking outside the box to be creative enough to make this happen. So I'm just excited to support this effort of getting these dollars out. I'm being stopped in the middle of the street, halfway in the middle of a sermon. And so I like some of this weight off of us, and for a mechanism to be in place that's already structured and have, history of how it could work. I just think it's a bright idea. To kudos to whoever who thought of it to make it possible to get us going.
I'd like to echo Reverend Grayson's sentiment. This is Marimba. Thank you all very much for helping us to at least potentially accelerate, should it be the advisory committee's pleasure today to approve this proposal. I think that in particular homeowners are in great need. The thoughtfulness around how to potentially prioritize the investments such that those who are most needy are considered first is, I think, very important. So I just want to echo Reverend Grayson's comments. Thank you.
This is Lakeisha, and I apologize, I'm driving, so I hope everybody can hear me. Just this is a question for clarity in the process. So applicants would still use the applications we've approved, right? And so we're just basically they'd come through that same application process we've developed, but those applications would be given to URA staff who are already doing this work. And so we just be kind of mirroring that process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct, Lakeisha. This is Julia speaking. Yes, we would use the housing application that this advisory board developed and approved. And it would be posted on the URA's website, and we would make it available for all the advisory board to share as well.
Okay. And then another question, because it's difficult for me as I'm driving to when the flow chart went up. So when those applications come in, are we still, is there still and I apologize because I was out of town for the last meeting. Are we still in agreement that there's still a navigator role that person is helping to make that assessment, or are all housing applications immediately going to the URA staff?
So there's two answers to that, Lakeisha. There's the long-term strategy, which is to still bring on the individuals that we've been discussing, but in an effort to address the immediate need and concern that we all hear on a daily basis, the URA staff, housing department, will be willing to step in until such time that we're fully organized. So they would be the ones receiving those applications, working with all those individuals, and then before sort of expending dollars, they would then submit a report to the advisory board saying, okay, 12 applications have come in. We're recommending you fund these 8 at these levels. Are you approving the expenditure of those funds? This advisory board would take that into consideration, vote yay or nay, and then they would be able to move forward. The URA board would not need to be able to approve that as a second stop, because if this goes to the URA board and at our August board meeting, we would simply be approving the expenditure of the funding. We don't have to approve each individual expenditure to each homeowner. So this advisory board would approve those dollars going out, and then the URA would expend the dollars, excuse me.
Got it. Thank you.
So I have a few questions. The first thing is the RFP that was approved by the URA board. Do we have a copy of that can be sent to the advisory board members?
Yes,
Yes.
Harvey, this is Hannah. Sorry, Councilman. Go ahead.
Yes, we can certainly resend that out. It's the exact same RFP that this committee first approved. But yes, we can send it back around.
Well, reason why I'm asking is because when Hannah sent something out, she asked for comments, and I don't know if comments came in or whatever the resolution is. That's why I'm asking. Nobody sent out a final version saying that this is it. That's why I'm asking that question. The second question is, so you guys had this conversation, and the question I have is, why weren't any of the other advisory board members involved in the conversation? And the reason why I'm asking that question is the HAT program has a 80% annual, AMI component, which we have. So how is that going to be resolved? And then the second thing is, in this allocation plan, it says $150,000 for administration. So how is this proposed stopgap going to be paid for? And things of that nature. None of those things are discussed anywhere. And then the last thing is, all right, so this says $465,000 basically for development initiative. Okay, and we have a $20,000 cap, which basically would limit that at maximum to 22 recipients. So there has to be some way to say, well, the process, this application costs this much. The reason why I'm asking these questions is because the fund has one deposit and may not get another for several years. So how we spend these dollars we need to maximize that so that the majority of the dollars go to the community. So there's things like that that are open, and I don't see where, if they have been discussed, there's no evidence of that in regards to what's been presented. And I thought that we had said in the last meeting that when there's going to be a presentation, that the details of that presentation would be emailed to the advisory board members at least 3 days in advance. So, you know, there's discussion here. It sounds good. There's the gap with the 80% AMI and so forth that we don't have in our process. That needs to be resolved. How this is going to be paid for, that needs to be resolved, and what it's going to actually cost, and how many recipients, because if you go by the 465 here and the $20,000 cap, that's 23 recipients, you know, 462 versus, you know, and then if it's smaller, you know, those things need to be discussed and put in writing so that, you know, people can see, because what I foresee is there's 50 applications and there's 20 people that get approved, and there's going to be probably some noise about that. So there's several questions in there. I'm
So,
done.
okay. So just try to recall all your questions. I'll start at the back end. I think no matter what this committee does, there's not enough money, unfortunately, to help everyone. So whether we had 465, whether we had 1 million, we would still receive more applications than we would have dollars to go out, unfortunately. However, one of the other benefits of having URA staff assisting us with this is there are other programs that the URA staff can also direct individuals to, right? So this being one, and there are other dollars out there that our dollars could sort of potentially be leveraging, supporting, and going further. The 80% AMI, the 80% AMI, that's the HAP guidelines that we openly recognize. That is not the cap for this committee, because we openly recognize the need is much deeper than 80% AMI.
And so what I'm saying, Dan, is that there's nothing in regards to your answer to the first question. I agree that we don't have enough money, but people are going to always have some type of feelings about that, and how people are chosen to receive the dollars and how people were excluded. There's nothing that describes that. So that's where that question primarily came from. And in regards to, you know, the 80% AMI, you know, I understand what we're saying, but we have nothing in writing that says, well, this category of applicant is a higher priority than the next applicant, and so forth and so on. There's nothing in writing that describes that. So really what I'm getting to is that, you know, something that we had discussed over a year ago is that we didn't want to have any appearance of favoritism to one group or person and things of that nature. So that's what the direction of that question is coming from. So I think we need to put something in writing so that we can present to the community besides just the application, so that people can see how the process, the vetting process actually is being handled. Because right now, you know, it's very nebulous.
Gordon,
So
can you go back a slide or two where we did put down sort of suggested ways of how to vet?
yes, you did, but there's no priority. So how are we going to, you know, how that needs to have a priority assigned to it, and we haven't done that.
Is the eligibility suggestion, I mean, wouldn't that technically be considered a priority?
Well, that's just suggestion with no priority. Which top is a senior more important than a household with school-age children or households with disabled individuals, and then critical home repairs, and then we have the AMI not to exceed 80%. You know, there's a lot of conflicts in there that should be resolved before we push this out so that it appears to be fair to everyone.
Okay, so let's talk through this a little bit. So if we're looking at the eligibility suggestions that are listed here, my presumption, James and or URA team, is that this would also be time bound. So, or time based is probably the better way to describe it. So if you apply first, then you would be considered first, and you would also be vetted through these categories: income-based, meaning 80% or less, critical home repair, school-age children living there, senior living there, disabled individuals. So if you apply first, and these particular categories also apply, and I would imagine that the more that apply, the greater the priority, you would be, you know, kind of advanced in the process. But I think it's all going to be based on when people apply, and then if they fall into any of the priority categories, and if they fall into multiple priority categories. But let's talk through it. Any insight that the URA can give us would be helpful.
Sure. I want to jump in just really quickly, and then I want to invite Kiana Wassler, our Chief Housing Development Officer, to add some additional context as she oversees our housing department. So, you know, I think with these eligibility suggestions, we are talking about a holistic review across all of these categories. And so, you know, we would be talking about, you know, if you fit, you know, if someone has a critical home repair and they have school-age children and, you know, their AMI is under 80%, right? Like that would be something in the evaluation that we would say, okay, here are all of these factors that are holistically showing a demonstration of priority need. And therefore that application could likely have more weight. I don't want to give a definitive answer right now as to everything, because we're still talking about some of the details here. But with that, I'm going to pause, and Chief Frank, I see you jumped off.
Before you go on, so now this is changing to first come, first serve. That's one question.
No.
Wait a minute, please. And so, you know, I can see where you can assign a point value to each one of these 6 categories, and the people that have the most points would be moved to the top of the list. So, you know, there's 2 things there that have been discussed, and one is the first come, first serve, which was just promoted by the co-chair, which really is not fair. But if you assign a point value to each one, or 1 point to each of the 6 categories, and if you end up with 5 out of 6 or something like that, that would be reasonable. It just needs to be clear and explainable to the community, but it can't be first come, first serve.
I didn't say first come, first serve. To clarify, I said that it would be time-based and then assessed based on the priorities that we have outlined. So in other words, if you are submitting right now, and then I come behind you and I submit 1 hour later, and and there's only one more grant left, right? And we both hit on the maximum number of the category, and we both hit on the maximum number of the categories, the applicant that submitted before, you know, first would be considered and would be the one who would be advanced, because that is fair. So that's what I was saying, just to clarify.
Thank you. And before Ms. Wassler begins, I just want to acknowledge for the record that Alicia George has also joined the meeting. Ms. Wassler.
Thank you, Councilman Lavelle. Good afternoon. I just want to add some clarity around how the URA is doing this eligibility weighted process now. And this is just clarity. This doesn't mean this is how you should do it. We can come up with your own plan around the weights. So what we're doing currently with our HAP program is we have the application open during a specific time period. Every application is received and logged into a spreadsheet. Once the application period closes, we take all applications, not based on time, but just all applications. You know, we as we receive them, we review them and kind of kick out the ones that don't qualify immediately so that they can fix their application and resend it in. But the ones that do qualify are all added to a spreadsheet. And when the application period is over, we've added all the different eligibility weights, and we will do a selection based on the weight. We are not selecting based on time, but if that is something that this committee wanted to do, you could do that. Just wanted to provide that clarity.
That's a great clarification. What was described is first come, first serve, or time, being that you have a initiating period of where the applications are accepted and then the period closes. That's the amount of time. It can't be when your application was received. That's not fair. But I appreciate that. The weighting that you guys have, how did you come up with the weighting? In terms
We
of
actually, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. In terms of which one has is a more dominant in the evaluation process and which one's least dominant?
Right. So what we did is we took a page out of the Action Housing Whole Home Repairs process. If anyone's heard of that program, they actually came up with a weighted process with a university's assistance. And so what we've done with our process, we've added, our different categories to be weighted, and we are only assigning like one weight point to each category. So we are considering our greatest, a household with seniors. If you're a household with senior and you're also taking care of school-age children, your AMI is closer down to 30 or 50%. Like, we've also weighted the different AMI levels, right? So if it's a deeper affordability household, then that would have a higher, that'd be a point on its own. So that's kind of how we're doing it here.
Okay,
so all those different weights can add up to be a combined score.
Yeah, a score. So since our application doesn't consider income, what would you suggest, if anything, to replace the AMI not exceeded 80%?
So I think you can add a weight like if you want to do a 3 for someone at or below 30%, if you want to do a 2 for someone at 50% and 1 for someone at 80%. You know what I mean? That's a way to give more weight to someone who maybe has a deeper need than an 80%.
Well, all right, so let me clarify. Our
Okay.
application doesn't ask for income. The way the application is structured now.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't ask for income. So there's no way to do a weighting such as what you propose in its case, which would be more of satisfy more of a privacy issue. So that category wouldn't exist with our application. So what I was asking, is there another suggestion to replace that AMI category? Because it's not included in our application.
I think part of the question here, though, from my vantage point is, should it? And I think that's part of what the committee needs to deliberate on. It, I believe, may have just been an oversight that we didn't consider income. Maybe I'm speaking for myself. I initially was not thinking about income, but when we think about it, do we want people who can afford to make their own repairs, right, being preference over people who cannot afford to make their own repairs? So I think we need to as a committee, really consider that and actually make a decision as to where we're going to land there.
So that's another discussion that has to have some fact basis on how we're going to do that. Or are we going to just willy-nilly?
Yeah, we
again?
should actually vote on it today.
So we're going to willy-nilly this again.
No, we should vote on whether or not we want to, well, we can vote on whether or not we want to adopt this model, or we can, perhaps you consider it willy-nilly. I certainly don't. I mean, you know, these are categories that are very well vetted within the housing community and the community development space. I just think we need to determine whether or not we are going to look at a need-based, look at this through a need-based lens.
Well, that's not the question. The question actually is that we're going to try to make a determination without having limited debate and really no information, because there could be a better way, because, you know, we're just taking something what someone else has. And a lot of times that's a recipe for failure, but you know, if that's what we want to do. But it's very, what it goes back to my previous question is, you guys started having these discussions some weeks ago and you didn't include any of the other advisory board members, and some of these things could have been resolved up front and we wouldn't be having the discussion we're having now. That's where the other question comes from, because there's more to
So
this.
we did have a meeting yesterday, RB, just to touch point and because the URA had been responding to the feedback that they're getting. Individual members have been concerned on a month-to-month basis about the delays in getting the LERTA fund out. I know that I certainly am concerned about the delays in getting the LERTA fund distributed, just as many members are. The URA is responding to that concern by offering us a program that they are administering on a regular basis. And I think that what some other members are saying is, it's great that we have a potential solution to get a portion of the funds out immediately. And so I think that sometimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes we do need to invent the wheel. But I don't personally believe, and other members should speak to this, that we need to reinvent the wheel in this particular case. Thank you.
I'm not asking for reinventing of the wheel. All I'm asking is that when you have these discussions, you're telling me you had a meeting yesterday, okay? I wasn't invited, okay? I'm a member of this board. All I'm saying is, if there's supposed to be inclusion and collaboration, there has to be a dissemination of the information, and that's not happening. And that's a problem, and that's part of the reason why we have had such a long delay. Thank you.
Understood. And please, you know, I appreciate your comments, but it is a normal function of chairs to meet prior to a larger committee meeting, to deliberate with staff and or others to ensure that meetings are efficient. So while I appreciate your comment, it is normal practice for chairs to deliberate to ensure that meetings can be administered. So if there are other people who have comments, members are not going to be included in every co-chair meeting. So I appreciate your comments. We will take it under advisement, but it's not normal practice. And we do need to get through this meeting as well. But your comments are appreciated. Thank you.
Are there other thoughts, comments, questions from members?
Yeah,
Dr.
I was
Ellis?
just gonna say, this is Lakeisha. You know, I do remember us having a conversation in regards to the housing repairs and, you know, support, because, you know, it was the housing repairs, the rent, the mortgage, like all of those things that were in the context of housing. We did specifically have conversations about the reality that people would need to apply to this fund because they, one, could not afford it, and two, could not, you know, access other funding sources, right? And so I think it probably is, right, unfortunately, a collective oversight on our part to not, in the application, ask for that documentation. to verify somebody's income, right? But I do remember, I'm sure that in our minutes or somewhere in the past several months, that there is evidence of us having that conversation.
Thank you.
So
Dr.
isn't
Ellis?
this supposed to be the last stop? In other words, we were supposed to be the last resort where the applicant had went through and applied for other monies and other locations and was turned down. That's what we originally said. That's why the AMI information wasn't included, because we said that, well, if they've been turned down other places and this is the last stop, then they should be considered based upon their need. And that's what we decided.
We were not able to find that on the record, that was an actual decision by the committee, but we did look.
We said that this would be a fund for the last stop because we only have one deposit. It'd be different if we had reoccurring deposits that were scheduled on a regular basis. We don't have that. And that's why we said we would be a fund of last resort, fund of last resort. And that's why that wasn't included.
Kim?
Dr. Ellis has had her hand raised for some time now.
Sorry, thank you all. There's a bus, so I want to apologize for the noise. Just a few things. Let me just turn on my light since I'm speaking. So I just kind of want to remind everybody of just a few things. One, that deposited funds of $7.18 million arrived into the URA September of 2021. We do know that $287+ were sent to the Hill CDC. And the rest of the time, we've been working on refining the application process, which respectfully, as we examined, it was initially only set up for really a sophisticated nonprofit organization to get the funds and not an individual resident of the historic Hill District. And so, as you all know, myself, RB, Lakeisha, Richard, we formed a subcommittee. I know Alicia came on later on to refine the application process because we found it too hard for an individual resident to apply for. While I'm here, to Lakeisha's point, yes, I think the income verification could be worthwhile, but honestly, we know the average income of Hill residents, and we don't exceed the amounts that are in even the outline of the HAP program. So I don't think that I don't think we should get caught up, on anything like that. I also want to remind everybody that we had a really bad storm just this past weekend. I don't know about you all, but I've had to get roof repairs, and I had to do that immediately. So it is what it is. In January of 2022, I submitted a survey taken very quickly of Hill resident priorities that was modeled after the categories that were created by this committee. It was officially adopted by this body. I just want to remind everybody that this conversation, this push, this request to expedite, in spite of not having everything together, is an old one. RB has pushed for it. I've pushed for it. Reverend Grayson has pushed forward. So I think I even made an official motion. So I just want to remind, even for RB, relax, it's okay, because even though they met yesterday, we're on record. We're on record pushing for an expedited process and a transparent process, but an expedited process because we know we live in a community with great need. And then finally, for at least a year, I've advocated for this expedited process. And I think that this is definitely the right thing to do, and it's the conscientious thing to do. So I will definitely be voting for us to do that today. One of the questions that I have is, according to the HAP program, well, I have two questions. One, I was in the meeting when the HAP program was first announced. And so I spread it throughout the community, told community meeting, hey, the whole home repair program is coming. Everybody get ready. Now, what I'm understanding, and this is just a question, I'm hearing feedback. It was already announced that because this is countywide, that they're not going to get to everybody. We know that there's just not enough funds, as Councilman Lavelle said, not just about the LRTA funds, but any money. So I'm hearing that I heard the number 2 of like 2 applicants per neighborhood or something like that. I would love to get clarity on that. And number 2, I wanted to know if, since there is overlap between the HAP program and our LRTA fund distribution for home repairs, will the HAP program supplement some of the repairs that seem to cost over $20,000 with up to $15,000 in funds? Because we know the HAP program, the cap is $35,000 and the LRTA cap is $20,000. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
I'll start, and then James, if you could maybe answer the second question, as I was not in the meeting yesterday. I am unsure about the whole homes programs and its ability to only do 2 applications per neighborhood. I could definitely check in on that for you. I know that for the HAP program, we have not added an eligibility based on neighborhood. And we're not doing a selection based on, like 1 per neighborhood or anything like that. So I'm not sure about whole homes, but for HAP, we have not added that piece to it. James, can you speak to the second question about stacking the 2 program, the HAP and the LRTA?
So, I think the current thinking on stacking is a bit disjointed just because of the nature of when the HAP applications are due, having those due on August 4th. And we're talking about trying to have this application open, after a URA board approval. So that would be mid-August. So there would be a little bit of disjointed time. And I'm not sure, in terms of HAP's decision-making process, where you all will be during that. So we had, so the thought is, have folks apply to HAP, or if they've already applied to HAP, they can have the consideration under HAP. And then, when we open up, folks can apply as well, but we would go through that needs eligibility assistance. And I think there could be the ability to cross-reference the applications that we're receiving with those who are in HAP. If this committee were to determine one way or another, hey, because we know there are limited dollars, we really just want our dollars to stretch to people, who are not necessarily going to receive any HAP dollars or anything like that. So I think there's room for this committee to weigh in on that particular factor.
And just to add to that, we have, there have been 6 applications received so far for the HAP program from Hill District residents. We've also received 6 HAPPY applications from Hill District residents. I unfortunately don't have the dollar amount, what the request is in front of me right now, but there is an opportunity potentially to stack, if any of these 12 are approved through the application process, and there could be an opportunity for those applicants to potentially stack if needed.
Thanks so much,
So
James.
I have one question. So if a person, as you just described, applies for the HAP program, which has more money to allocate, I presume, than the LRTA fund, how is that going to work? Because we already know that our fund is limited. And for the record, for clarification, I agree with expediting this expedited process. It's the problem I'm having is it's not described in how it's going to be fair, equitable, and reasonable to the community. That's the problem I'm having. So as we were saying before, this was supposed to be a fund of last resort. So if a Hill District resident applies for HAP and they're turned down, the question becomes, is that going to be commonplace where behind the scenes, or we're going to, since the Hill has their own money, their residents are going to be directed there where they're not going to get any of the HAP money. That was one of the things that we had a conversation about over a year ago as happening, where, okay, the Hill has their money, they're going to spend their money first, and then, you know, so forth and so on. And the residents won't have an equal opportunity as some of the other residents in the city. So how would that be managed? Basically, somebody gets turned down for HAP. You know, if they want to be, you follow what I'm saying, Dan?
I understand what you're saying. I'm telling you that would not be the case. So any individual who applies for HAP is going to get determined based on their need, right? Based on all the various criteria and where they end up on that needs assessment. There, and under no certain case would the URA staff say, well, this is a Hill District resident, therefore we're not going to fund them. We'll just send them over to the LRTA funding. They're going to either be chosen based upon their need or they won't be. Okay. Now, if you're asking of the 100 applications that come in and we only fund 75, and clearly I'm making these numbers up, if they're some of the 25 who are Hill District residents, could they then come to the LRTA? Yes. And that sort of speaks to your concern of last resort.
Right, that's what we intended it to become at the beginning. I just want to make sure as best as reasonably possible that people aren't excluded from HAP because they're Hill District residents.
Understood.
And because they're using the same criteria, apparently, from what we're being presented today. So there is a possibility that can happen, especially if the application review process is being done by the same group of people. So that's something that we need to be having some forethought, so that if it comes up from the community, that we have a suitable answer. So, you know, if anybody has suggestions or, you know, just so that the community knows that this is a fair, equitable, and reasonable approach to the LRTA funds being expedited, you know, having an expedited release to the community.
I have another quick question. Oops, let me turn my camera on. The HAP applications are already open, correct? And they close August 4th. Is that what I heard, James?
Correct.
Okay, so if the application is already open, we're for this expedited process, we're using the HAP application, like and we're not using our application just yet, right?
No, we will be using our application.
Okay, okay, with the HAP standards and staff.
with the staff, yes.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, so Arby, I mean, so what Kiana described is that there are already 12 historic Hill residents that have already applied. They would be eligible for consideration if this determination has been made to add on to the LRTA funds, for example. And so we can tell people to start applying to what we should do. We should, we need to find a way. Since we're using our application, since we already approved, so the only holdup at this point is the 3 staff members or 2 staff members that we agreed to bring on. Is that correct, Councilman LaBelle?
No, the only holdup to do this would be this advisory board voting to accept this recommendation. And
right.
Then and then the URA would also vote to approve.
Right, I didn't mean this. I didn't mean this. I meant the only holdup to, like, let's set HAP aside just for a second. The only holdup to our LERTA process is the approval and those RFPs coming out and the hiring of 2 staff members, correct?
For the larger amount of the fund, correct.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is that we release our application solely for the housing under this HAP process and whatnot. And let's go ahead and release that. Because I thought that there might be 2 different applications, but since there aren't, we should just go ahead and release so that people can apply, and then we won't get caught up in that August 4th deadline, where people would be automatically excluded from the additional $15,000. Not to say that they're necessarily going to get the $15,000 as a guarantee, but you don't want people to be automatically excluded because of the deadline.
Okay. Well, before you go, Dr. Ellis,
I think, sorry, Councilman.
I was going to ask her if she wanted to frame that in a form of a formal motion.
Wait, before we do that, it's my understanding that the August 4th item is because the URA board has to vote following our decision as a committee. So I'm not sure that there's a way to get out of the time challenge that we're faced with here, because the URA board has to affirm our decision. But maybe I'm misunderstanding what's really causing the timing challenge.
I think what Dr. Ellis is asking is that if we're going to use our application that's already approved, that we release that application and let it go out to the community, and the HAP application process closes August 4th, that has no effect on our application process and when that window would close, because we haven't designated a window, a time period for when that window would close. So they're 2 different things. The concern is that it gets out to the community and that they understand that there's 2 distinct, different processes that are available for Hill residents. That's one of the things that I think Dr. Ellis was trying to describe.
Yes. And yes, I can make a formal motion, Councilman Lavelle.
Well,
Can I just ask a question really quickly before the formal motion? So are we accepting, because the question came up when Ms. Wasser described the income requirement. And so I guess the question is, are we okay with the same income requirements, right? Are we going to use all of the same, like the same model, or is there any piece of that we want to tweak?
So the model between HAP regarding the income requirements is different than what we're suggesting for this. What we're suggesting for this is that your AMI should not exceed 80%, because we know the need is, to Dr. Ellis's point, the incomes are so much lower and the need is greater. So that was our recommendation, was not to exceed AMI. To Kim's point, also need to bring a roofer over, right? But you don't want me applying for this funding. But Ms. Johnson, who's a senior fixed income, she will need that.
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
Good. It appears that, some of the, I don't want to use a word as strong as apprehension, but some of the hesitation in this process and getting things out is that we may not do it even-handedly, or we may not treat everybody equally. Well, in this, I believe that we are not going to get it right going out, putting it out there. We're not going to hit the targets on the first try. But what we have to do is have the desire and ability to adjust from when people get feedback, we have to bring it to the table and consider it. But we're not going to get it right. But we have to do something. And to Marimba's point about it going up the food chain, so to speak, I think the URA or whoever else has to sign off on it should know that we're ready to go. We want it to go now, so that may help to expedite it, but at least we will do our part. We have to do our part as quickly as possible.
So let's call for the order today.
Say again?
Well, I believe we should expedite this.
Reverend
I
Grayson
agree.
is calling for the order today for a vote. And we've been on the line for an hour and a half. Can we call for order today?
Well, we're going to vote today, and I agree with being expedited.
I mean, I think we should call for vote, whether yay or nay, and then we'll just accept it. Any more that we've deliberated for over an hour, and I think the information was good and the deliberation is important, but it comes to a point we just have to move this process along. So I'm calling for order of the day for a vote.
So I have one question, Reverend Grayson, one question.
Yes, sir.
And I agree with Mr. Witherspoon. However, we meet once a month, and the last time we had a meeting was 7 weeks ago. So we don't get it right, and then we're going to revisit it in 4 weeks again. That's the concern I've always had. So how do we resolve it?
That's a two-part question. I'd like to personally take a vote on this action so we can move forward, and then I wouldn't mind at our next meeting dealing with your very valid question.
So Reverend Grayson, would you be willing to offer up a motion to accept this proposal?
I move that we accept this proposal for collaboration with the URA to move these dollars forward for this new round and for this round.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can we do a roll call vote, Julia?
Gordon, can you go back to the screen? With all our advisory board members.
Sure. I have it in front of me. You want me to just go?
Oh, sure.
So, Maroon Lyons,
Yay.
Richard Witherspoon,
Yay.
R.B. Bankston,
Yay, and I have two questions. How much are we going to spend? Hasn't been determined, and what's the criteria for selection? But my vote is yay.
Reverend Glenn Grayson,
Yes.
Alicia George,
Yes.
Dr. Kimberly Ellis,
Yay.
and Lakeisha Wolf.
So my vote is yes, and I did have one clarifying question about if we were going to use an open date and a closed date around waiting the things, because we didn't determine that.
So the motion, so the motion passed. I believe the first round would be beginning immediately after the URA's board meeting, which is around the 10th. And then it would close on September 30th. And that would be the first round.
And can I make my motion, Councilman Lavelle, since you suggested it?
And that is to post the application?
Yes, and to use our application, absolutely.
So, okay, so you're offering up a motion to immediately post the application?
Absolutely. So I'd like to make a motion that this body approve the immediate release of the application that we have already approved, so that people can apply and qualify now for any additional HAP funds if possible, and not be blocked by the deadline. So to immediately release the application that has already been approved by this committee for the purposes of home repairs for the LRTA fund and HAP funds.
Is there a second?
Just a clarification, it's not for the HAP fund, right? It's just for the LRTA fund.
Yes.
Okay.
So all
I'm asking
those
for,
in favor?
No, no,
I'm
no, no.
sorry.
No, my understanding was that we're doing this because the HAP fund has already begun, right? It has not begun.
No, HAP is already open.
That's what I'm saying. So we're letting people apply using the LERTA application. Wait, I see Lisa shaking her head.
No, not
Okay,
for HAP.
My
let's-
understanding is that the only relationship between the HAP and the LERTA, except that they both have money, is that as a way of expediting the LERTA fund, we're just gonna lean on the apparatus, mainly the staff of the HAP fund. But if you want HAP money, you gotta use the HAP application. And if you want LERTA money, you gotta use the LERTA application.
That's correct.
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 All right.
And can I, Councilman, my question in the chat, I just want to clarify. So you're saying after the URA board meeting and they approve releasing this set of LERTA funds, that the application would open, but then it would close in September?
Yes, as for the first round, so that staff could review everything, weight it, and then provide recommendation to this committee. Once this committee decides on X amount of dollars to go out, we could then open a second round.
Could I just say, I actually think that's important from a sort of equity issue. Like if you say to people, okay, this is the window, and it gives time for word to get out, but then you close the window and then you evaluate what you have, rather than do it on a rolling basis where it's kind of first come, first serve, and then the money's gone. And like often that makes it, the money goes to the people who are, most tuned in, most alert, have the most ability to fill out a form and so on. So I really like that kind of window, score it all, like sort of then put a proposal out of all of the applications about how we would spend the money once we actually land on an amount.
And I just wanted to add, there was some discussion amongst the board members about determining a dollar amount for all of this activity and more specific to the application and income reporting requirements. So we wouldn't, if we are going to modify the application to address that information, we would not be able to release it immediately. And it may just from a full comprehensive standpoint be more prudent to release it, to time the release of the application with the approval of the URA board, and then perhaps in the meantime there could be some work done to say to folks, hey, please get prepared for an application that's going to come out. I'll leave that to the board to kind of noodle on a bit.
Kim is open to revising her motion. I would suggest that we give the URA 72 hours, 3 business days, starting tomorrow, to make the revisions to the application such that the application can be released no later than a specific date. And if the committee decides to deliberate and say it shouldn't be 72 hours, it should be another amount of time, we should make that decision. Understood what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, James. It's noted that it can't be immediate because there are several revisions, but we do need to make it time bound. So
I have a question. In our application, there is a component in the application for emergency. So how are we going to handle that? If somebody says they have an emergency and the application is out, and we're saying that there is a window for the applications, there's conflicts there. So how and who is going to resolve that and present something in writing? In fact, I would make a motion that be done. That we need clarity on how this application is going to be handled in regards to an emergency, because that's part of it, and all the discussion hasn't addressed that. I want it to be expedited, but there are gaps. So how are we going to do that?
I think that as far as an emergency component is concerned, we really, I think that we should get our foundation in place first in terms of application processing and things like that. And then we can add on an emergency component. I mean, like if someone has an emergency today, we wouldn't be set up at this time for emergency disbursements. Later on, once we are acclimated to the process, then we can build in an emergency component, because you could get, weighed down with process. And, one person's emergency might not necessarily be an emergency. So we have to define what an emergency is. So there's a whole different kind of process to that type of disbursement. I have another question.
Richard, hold on one second, because before we go down having these other conversations, there's been a motion and there was a second regarding the actual release of the application, but Marimba also wanted to amend that motion a little bit. Can you state what the amendment?
I would just recommend that we amend and make it time bound such that the URA has 72 hours to make as you all recall, the application covered all of our categorical areas. And so now we're just focused on the home repair. So they would need to remove everything except for that specific category. And then also they would need to add, I suppose, check boxes for specific areas such as, are you a senior? Are you disabled? Are there children of school age living in your home? Confirm income. I don't know if that was on the first one or not. Those priority areas that we talked about today. That's my proposed amendment.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any?
Aye.
Seeing none, the motion passes. With that, at our last meeting, we were asked to provide an update on the LRTA spend. James, do you have an update?
Yes, I do. Right, thank you. This will be short and sweet. The balance as of yesterday, 7/19/23, was $7,171,753.43. The only transaction from the account was the annual $1,000 escrow agent fee, which was paid to Zion's Bank.
So James, I have a question.
Yes.
7.171 million. Is that the original amount that was deposited in the fund minus the 1,000?
No, that is not. The account earns interest.
So what I'm asking is, what was the original amount deposited in the fund?
Roughly $7.1 million, or roughly $7.2 million.
So that's the reason I'm asking. So that's 23,000 short of 77.2 million.
Right.
So just
And
trying to do the numbers.
as we had talked about at the last meeting where we had this, we did talk about that the first transaction that happened, and this would have been within a couple of months of the capitalization of the fund. There was the payment to the Hill CDC. So we covered that in prior. This is just an accounting of transactions for 2023.
So the $1,000, to be clear, the $1,000 escrow agent fee is the only payment from the fund in 2023.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a request. It may have been sent out already and I missed it, and if it has been, I apologize, but could someone send me a process for approval from the time an application is received until it's dispersed and, in bullets, application received, verification of income or whatever criteria is required for the approval process in a bullet list form, so that we can, so that I can, make sure we're in compliance to our policy.
We
Is
can
that possible?
share that, Mr. Witherspoon. Yeah, we can work on that and get that to you. It might come with the updated application.
That would be great. That
Okay,
would be
thank you.
great.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
And I actually have another question about the
Wait,
account.
But can you hold on just 1 second? James, can you just repeat the amount that you said was in the account, please?
Yes, as of yesterday, 7/19, the balance was $7,171,753.43.
Lakeisha?
Yeah, so my question was, I know in the several weeks back in our subcommittee meeting when we were reviewing, I think the policies and procedures document, and as the URA is staffing this work, how is the URA kind of billing this account, if that's the appropriate way to say that, right? How is the URA, taking payment for the staffing?
Yep, so the URA does bill this fund for staff time, actual staff time. How that works, we code our time at the URA and we use a labor code that's appropriate to the work on this fund. We have not charged the fund for any work to this point. We intend to do so soon, but we have not done so yet.
So the accounting of the hours charged, is there a way to provide, if since we're going to be charged this, is there a way to provide a report of that with details in advance of this charge?
I believe so. I don't want to get too far ahead. I want to make sure that I speak with our CFO and some managers before, or in leadership before I can give you a definitive answer there.
Okay, I would like to put forth a motion that we request the URA to provide us with an accounting of the hours that are going to be charged to the LRTA fund before the bill is presented. Is there a second?
I second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? The motion carries. Lastly, under old
Wait.
business.
Sorry. I think I need the proposal because we are saying, so we're gonna open up the application for housing in a few days. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is to make sure we have enough people who qualify under the deadline of August 4th, knowing that our approval will go through the URA board meeting. I don't think it's fair to residents to close it at the end of September, because then there'll be, a lot of people will just sort of hearing about. I mean, we know the word is spreading, but I'm just saying officially it will be passed in August. So I would like to extend it for another month to the end of October. I think that that's fair for Hill residents to have a few months to get their applications in before we open up another window.
I just want to chime in terms of sort of how the process we've been thinking about how that would work. And so we would get all of the applications, and at the last day, the application window would cut off. And then the application review would start. So,
More meetings, right?
so if
Never
we,
ends.
so if
Rev,
you were
Rev,
to
we need you to
extend
go
it,
on, we need you to go on mute, Rev.
so if you were to extend it to the application to window by another month, the applications wouldn't be reviewed until that period is done. So we're talking about reviews not happening until November.
Okay, I see what you're saying, James. I didn't know that that was the process. Because in the meantime, while the Hills applications are being like held in the queue,
Renee,
county, they're being processed, right? Like as they come in, or are you holding everybody's? What's the process?
Are you asking about the HAP program in particular?
Yes.
Kiana, can you answer that question?
Sure, we will close the HAP programs round. I believe August 4th is the date. So that will close. We will start our process of selecting the final eligible list for that. Once that closes, we can let this group know of the Hill District residents that have applied and have made it, you know, have maybe not been approved and have been approved. And so our process will continue to stay on that August 4th track, closing August 4th, and then to start our selection process immediately after. And then the process, it sounds like the process of this committee will follow immediately behind that, opening an application specifically for the Hill and for this program.
So how long do you expect your process of evaluating the applications to take? What's your best guess? Because it's the number of applications dependent. I understand that.
We're hoping no longer than a 2-week turnaround once the application closes, because we're kind of starting, you know, they're being tracked as they're received. So we'll add the weights. We'll go through an internal, you know, committee review, and then send out the approvals and denials.
So our allocation plan has 465,000 in it for this year. And your HAP program, is it expected to spend more or less than that in that regard?
I don't have that dollar amount in front of me.
More. This is Tanika speaking. I can jump in.
Thanks.
So
Nika.
it is no problem. The HAP program is expected to have more, but I did want to. I want to clarify. I hope I'm hearing it correctly. So Dr. Ellis, you're asking for the LERTA application to be made available immediately. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that people can apply for the HAP, can apply or be eligible for any type of supplementary funds from the HAP fund.
Okay, the only issue with that is that a part of the legislation with this fund, we have to go back to the URA board. So once you finish everything else you're discussing, you still have to determine the maximum dollar amount that you want to spend in housing for this year. Once you determine that, so I'm just going to say, for an example, it's 400,000. That's what you want to spend in housing. That has to go to our URA board. Our next board meeting is Thursday, August 10th. So ideally, the application can't really open until we have board approval to utilize those funds. And so that's where Councilman Lavelle was saying August 11th. So then the LERTA application would essentially be open from August 11th and it would close September, the end of September or October 1, whatever is decided.
But the HAP application closes off. And that's what James was bringing up, that it closes before this would start. That's why I made the motion to open up our application now. You know what I mean? So that's one thing. And then the next thing is that the LERTA application in general, not just for housing, but for everything, right? Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I'll just stick with housing for now. The LERTA application will potentially be approved August 10th and be, ready to roll August 11th, although we will have been collecting applications beforehand.
I see what you're saying. So we can't do that. I see exactly what you're saying, and I understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
And so the LRTA housing application is what we're speaking of. And that's the same thing, that it can't be released until we have URA board approval to use those funds. So I understand what you're saying, Dr. Ellis, once you explained it that way. So we're kind of saying the same thing, but also different. So it's the LRTA housing application. And that's what we need. That's what we should be saying moving forward. That's our interim suggestion. So the RFP is moving forward, but in order to get funds out the door and to really help the residents that deserve this money, we put this LRTA housing temporary program together, mirroring and modeling the HAP program. However, once the advisory board comes up with a dollar amount that you all want to spend for the LRTA housing fund, for the LRTA housing application, we then have to take it to the URA board for them to approve. And that's the problem where we are. So we can't do anything without URA board approval. And that's the earliest is August 10th.
Okay, I'm clear about that. My last question, well, my last two questions are, is this, so for everybody, for any and everybody who's applying for the HAP program, am I hearing correctly that you're not going to start processing anybody until August 4th, or will you be processing people literally from now until the closing of the application process?
So when we receive an application, we look at it for completeness, so that if it's not complete, we can reach back out to that applicant and give them an opportunity to get a complete application into us. So in regards of processing, we are doing that and adding the complete applications to a list. Beyond that, we're just kind of continuing to keep a list, but not really doing any processing until we do the final criteria selection.
And what I can share, Dr. Ellis and the rest of the advisory members, is that last week I went down to the housing department to the folks who are handling HAP, and the 12 individuals that Kiana spoke of, those are eligible. So there are 6 eligible Hill District residents they had complete applications that came in already. So those are eligible applicants that can move forward with HAP, and 6 eligible applicants that can move forward with HAPI. So that is confirmed.
Okay. So and they applied directly for the HAP program.
Exactly. With all the restrictions and all of those things, knowing that it's up to $35,000, that taxes have to be up to date. So all of those other items under HAP. So they are already prepared to move forward with the HAP program.
Okay. And then last question is, the HAP deadline is August 4th. The URA board meeting and activation of the LRTA application will be August 10th, starting, August 11th. Will that sort of 6-day process, will we have run out of time? I guess that's my question. Will we have run out of time and funds? Because, my understanding is that we all know funds are limited. Yeah, will we have run out of funds by the time the LRTA applications are approved for any type of HAP supplemental funding or anything like that?
I don't fully understand the question.
Yeah. Are you asking if the URA will run out of funds, or?
I think what she's trying to say is that if a person applied for LRTA funding and there's a $20,000 cap, and there's a $35,000 cap on the HAP funding, and there was a gap between what they were requesting, they would be ineligible to receive any gap funding from HAP, because the HAP application period expires on August 4th, and the LRTA, the first day it would be available would be August 11th, 7 days later. So she's looking at it from a gap perspective.
You're trying to stack them. So you're looking at stacking them. Okay.
Well,
I think it's worth noting, though. I think it's worth noting that you know, the programs, people are free to apply to both programs, so long as they, for the LRTA, live within our geographical area and hopefully, you know, meet the criteria, the priority criteria, although I don't think we're prohibiting anyone from applying. And while ideally it would align with the current HAP application, it may not completely in every way, right? And I don't know that there's anything that we can do about the realities of the timeline, considering that we need approvals. However, this is not going to be the last HAP application that opens, if I'm understanding correctly how that program works. When is the next HAP application going to open? Does the URA know that yet?
We open one round per year. This is through our HOF housing trust funds. So I would recommend Hill CDC and other organizations that are members of this committee maybe helping to market the HAP over the next couple of weeks, just so folks understand the application closes by August 4th. You know, provide assistance to people who might need some application assistance. And so you get as many folks from the Hill applying to HAP, and then in the case that they didn't get selected, or they do get selected and then may have a need greater than HAP, we would have all those folks included in our process. I think at this point, at this late date, right, that's the way we should maybe go about it this year. Next year, we can try to time applications together or figure out a different process if you have additional funds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for the clarification. Because I think I want to end I know my motion passed, but now I'm realizing that it really doesn't matter. We should actually be pushing any people to apply for the program, and don't qualify, we can pick them up from the HAP application process.
Exactly.
Well, I do think, hold on. I want to clarify, because I think this is a really important thing. We are being very intentional about not mixing the applicants, because we will have our separate application process for the LRTA, right? And then the URA will have their separate application for the HAP. Now, it does not mean that someone can't benefit from both, but I think it's really important that they not be commingled, right? In that, you know, we're picking them up from HAP. We can invite them to apply to LRTA if they are not, right, if they don't get approved for HAP.
We're not authorized to approve HAP applications anyway, right?
Right. So I just want to be clear about what's happening. I think that, the URA has to administer HAP. They have to control that process. However they control that process, we know that there are Hill District residents who have applied to that because they have shared that information with us, and we encourage that. And I know we have been promoting it in the Hill District Week and Roundup every single week, and we will continue to do so both on our social media as well as the Roundup. However, I think that we have to stop short of, the idea that if someone applies for HAP, they automatically go to LRTA if they don't get HAP. I think we just have to say, we are going to ensure that they know and can apply to the LRTA fund, and we will support them through that process in that application, but not just take the application. I think that would be a mistake.
So I disagree, and here's why. Because one of the things we're going to be doing is asking people, we said that's a part of our process, is have you applied for this? Have you applied for that? Have you applied for the Urban League, and so on and so forth, right? So the HAP program is just another program that they will have applied for, and let's just say got denied, the funds ran out, whatever. That's an automatic, you have ready-made people with needs who have filled out this application. So the HAP program, that's a part of our process. We can ask them more questions, have you applied for this program and that one and that one? But if they get denied by HAP, they've already made that effort. So that's one thing. The second thing is, now that everybody has clarified the timing, it can be confusing to say we're going to release our LRTA housing application, which we are going to reformulate to make in an image of the HAP application. when they're not, when you have to fill out a HAP application in order to qualify for the HAP program. Like, I thought that we might be able to, you know, do some type of overlap, but that's not the case. So with that not being the case, I think we should promote that program. We should get our LERTA application approved on 10th, release it, you know, on August 11th, and then close it at the end of October. That's what I think we should do. Is that clear for everybody, like, in terms of what I'm mapping out here? Now that we have clarity on the dates and the funding and so on and so forth.
I think a lot of the voting members have logged off. We may have a few.
I will, I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm jumping in. I can't figure out how to raise my hand and move at the same time. Sorry. I already thought that was the case, Kim. Thank you for explaining that. My concern is this. We have already, my organization, we not only blasted it out, but we also printed it and gave it to our people. One has already gone in, I know, and I was treating LERTA separately because we have no control over HAP. HAP is another program, as well as our faith-based programs that can do things, as well as other entities out here. This is not the only opportunity in the mix. And what I want to be careful of is that some of even my own folk do not apply for one, get that, apply for the other. So I would like the communication from HAP, who has, you know, confirmation that they have when we review our LERTA, which should be separate from that. And so I was under that understanding that you just said anyway. But okay. And that's why I voted the way I did. And it's starting to get confused because I think I'm voting different things now. But I was under that very thought.
We have you here, Lakeisha, Arby, Maremba. So we still have enough voting members. I think we should go ahead and vote on this amended motion because we need to be, it's not going to suit our purposes to release the LERTA application that has been slightly revised to mimic the HAP application when you have to fill out a HAP application in order to get those. It's not a modified LERTA application. We have to be clear about that. I wasn't clear, so that's partly why. So I
don't think, Kim, I don't think that perhaps others thought that we were mimicking the HAP application. I never understood that we were happily. I'm not interested in mimicking the HAP application if that's what you're proposing. I'm not understanding why you would propose that when we work so hard on the application, the LERTA application.
Right, because your amendment said to give the URA staff time to revise the LERTA application, and you listed the qualifications up on the screen for the HAP program. That's why.
Okay, let me clarify that. I'm not at all, my amendment was not to change our application. My amendment is to become the HAP application. My amendment is, if you go back and look at our application, it has everything from children's programs to development, broader development initiatives, to mortgage assistance, to, it has a lot of categories. In order to release it immediately as you were proposing, all of that needs to be stripped out because we're not funding those right now through this program. We're only doing the housing. So when I was suggesting that we give them 72 hours to turn the application around, the reason why that time frame was relatively short is because it's really just taking things out that don't apply. And quite frankly, they will have to collect information about the priorities that we just said I think we said we agree with the priorities, which are disabled persons, seniors, children living in the home of school age, and income. That's just a matter of adding those items to the application, but not changing our application.
Okay, last question. Do we anticipate that we will have our staff, the two staff members that this LERTA committee is asking for putting out the RFP. Do we anticipate that we will have those 2 staff members by this August 10th meeting of the URA board?
I don't think the RFP has been released. So
All right.
until the RFP has been released, we won't have applicants. When will that RFP be released? Can anyone from the URA answer that question? I believe the board approved it.
Yes, I can jump in. It's Tanika. So the board did approve the RFP. We wanted to bring this, and this is like similar to what Councilman Lavelle stated at the very beginning of the meeting. We wanted to bring this to the table as well, just so you know that this was also an option. This is not replacing the RFP, but this would be in addition to the RFP. And so once we got out of this meeting, we would then be able to go ahead and to issue a release date for the RFP. So this was just to work in tandem with the RFP, but wanting to be able to show our support in getting the funds out.
I think this is just an interim thing where we're gonna, if I understand correctly, we're gonna borrow some URA staff just to let us get the home repair money coming out the door, and that the larger, all the different uses, and we would kind of stand up a kind of separate entity with staff. Like, we can keep moving on that track, but we're not hiring special staff for the interim, push the money out the door starting in August. We're just gonna lean on the URA staff.
Right, but we still do need to get a little bit of clarity, I think, for members who work so diligently on the RFP, on when that RFP will actually be released. Is that something that we're able to do within the next week? Or is there something that's keeping it from being released at this stage?
Hey, Marimba, this is Hannah. Oh, sorry, Shanika.
No, go ahead, Hannah. I think we're about to say the same thing.
I did not receive any edits or comments from the advisory board when I sent out the updated RFP. Perhaps that means there aren't any,
Right.
But if there are any more comments to come in, we haven't received them.
Okay, I think that probably indicates that there are no additional comments, but members, if you do have additional comments, please get them to Hannah within the next 48 hours. If it is the pleasure of the committee, we had already voted to release the RFP. If we can get those incorporated in the next 48 hours, that RFP can also be released by early next week. Is there anyone on the committee who has any concerns with that?
I do not. I actually sent back an email. Thank you. Looks good. So, I mean, I have no further comment on it.
Sorry, Alicia, you're right. I did receive your email. I apologize.
No worries. I'm just saying, I think that the subcommittee as a whole, what we wanted in there, got in there, and we are prepared to let it be released.
Excellent.
From what I gather.
So I have a question, a general question. Since the RFP was basically for an entity, and now we're hiring 2 different individuals, which would be a requisition, personnel requisition. Has anybody thought about how they're going to reconcile that? Because the 2 individuals are not an organization, which an RFP would be a request for a proposal from an organization, or are we going to get a request for a proposal from 2 different individuals or multiple individuals? That's something to think about, because there's a conflict there. So, but anyway, moving us forward, I would like to put forth a motion that we allocate $465,000 to this current round of applications.
Are you saying to change our total allocations that were voted upon earlier? Because that would not work out mathematically to the.
I'm not changing anything. In the list, it says $465,000. I'm just saying
that was for all development, though, you know.
Yeah, that was for all development. I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying, Arby. That's all.
Yeah, I understand. What I'm saying is, because we are trying to expedite how this is going to, housing is the #1 priority from the survey that Dr. Ellis put out, and everything else is saying the same thing, if you are aware. And that money to keep people in their houses and repair the houses is important, more important than all these other initiatives that haven't been vetted or discussed. So I'm saying that we should spend the $465,000 at this late period, because we're talking about fourth quarter of 2023, that we should spend the 465 on housing. That's what I'm saying.
I think it's also important to note that we don't have any additional money, right? Refresh me. This is a question for the URA before we entertain RB's proposal here. I believe we allocated, this plan is for the allocation of just this year, or is it the allocation for all funds? Can
It's
somebody refresh
just,
me?
it's just for this
2023.
year.
Just for this year. So next year, will it be, did we agree for 2 years for the allocation plan?
No, we have not come up with an allocation plan for 2024. We will need to do so. Gordon, if you could flip to the next slide, and then so the committee members can see the total that was allocated for this year.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. That's what I was referring to.
So I'm gonna make a friendly suggestion, because I did announce at the top that we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, because I have many URA staff members in this meeting who also have some other things they have to do. So I think this committee needs to set a date and time where we can discuss whether or not you want to expend all $465,000, which is for development initiatives, on strictly housing, and then provide whatever the decision is, that recommendation to the URA, so that can be a part of our board agenda item when we have to vote on August 10th. So we would need to come together clearly before that to give instruction to the URA on how much of that needs to be spent.
That's noted, Councilman Lavelle, and let's work on that. Since my motion did pass, I just want to amend it. If I need to make another motion, I can, but I don't think that I don't see that it would be helpful, given that we're not going to receive like some supplemental funds from the HAP program for people who apply for the LRTA, because you have to apply for the HAP program. That is the part that was confusing to me, and I don't think that it would be beneficial to release the LRTA application early now. I think we should push the HAP program, especially since we anticipate the LRTA application being approved literally next month. Like, what is it, less than 30 days at this point.
So I don't think you necessarily need to amend or provide a new motion. What under your motion, we could post it. Well, it was amended that the URA would have 72 hours to provide the correct version of it, which is just the housing portion. Strip out the other stuff, just the housing portion. It will not be live until the URA votes on the 10th.
Okay.
Whether or not it's posted on the website, it won't be live until the 10th because we won't have it expended it. So I don't think that's the thing. What I would like to do very, very briefly is if someone would be willing to offer up a motion for the URA to work on our next meeting, which would be the week of August 21 with a target date of Thursday, August 24th at 3 p.m.
Second. Oh,
All those in
motion
favor?
for meeting on August 24th.
Thank you, Aubrey.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Again, we're going to adjourn this meeting, but I'm gonna ask myself and Marimba if we can send around some dates and times for us to come back together to both determine the amount of spend as well as whether or not Dr. Ellis's idea of leaving it open for 2.5 months as opposed to 1.5 months. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all for your hard work and your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.